spent the last few weeks working our way through your choice of Arsenal's 50 greatest ever players. In the time that's left, we're going to talk about the 2 best ever. There'll be no argument about who those 2 players are. The only argument may be about which order you put them in. I'd like to start that argument, if I may, because I can't believe this fella's number 2. John, we've had players to choose from, players who've done wonderful things, players who've left a mark on Arsenal history. For me, just talking as a punter, Dennis Bergkamp is without question the greatest Arsenal player I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would probably, I think the order is right, really, so we'll come to it. Most people
it doesn't take much guessing to know who's number 1 at this stage.
But I know exactly what you mean. And I think what stands out in my memory about Dennis Bergkamp is that English football signed foreign players before Dennis, when they were sort of gone beyond their sell-by date, if you like, or they signed younger players who would emerge into world-class talents. But Dennis Bergkamp actually set the tone for the first real world-class superstar to come to English football, in my view. Others, obviously, you could argue all day about Zola and what a great player he was, but Dennis Bergkamp eclipses him for me, and also it was because he was an unbelievable star, when Arsenal signed him. And when Arsenal signed him, it was just incredible bit of business, It made every Arsenal fan stand up and take notice. And, it was just an incredible coup.
And that for me is just, obviously we're all aware of the way that Arsene Wenger has changed this football club forever, rewritten the kind of the DNA coding of this football club. But if there was a player that you had to pick out, and of course his arrival predated the arrival of Arsene Wenger, Dennis Bergkamp changed the club in the same way, for exactly the reasons John said. It just made everybody suddenly, not least the players in the dressing room that Dennis joined, sit up and go, hang on, we signed a world great here. And for all that he achieved as an individual, you could argue that what he inspired at this club was as great as anything he achieved as an individual.
Yeah, we've talked about the effect that Alex James had in the Chapman era. To me, Dennis Bergkamp was the embodiment of what Arsene Wenger wanted to do for Arsenal. And the irony is, of course, he didn't buy him. He was already there. How great is that piece of luck? And I have to say that Dennis has been responsible for so many unbelievably cliched headlines, because what did we call him? The Ice Warrior. Because he had that amazingly cold ability to be able to judge a situation perfectly, and yet a kind of magical, ethereal, angelic quality to produce something we'd never seen before on the pitch. And I just couldn't believe that this package could be in one man, especially an Anglophile who used to go to Hastings on his holidays as a kid, and whose parents supported Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous mix of things.
And his dad had named him after Dennis Law. I mean,
yeah.
But he had all those things that Sue's talking about. But what he also had, he had a hard edge. He was a really fierce competitor, wasn't he?
Yes, you don't mess with Dennis Bergkamp if you're a defender. You've got to give
especially
him,
not if you're Steve Lomas.
well, you've got to give him a certain amount of respect for his ability as well. But any striker who gets to that kind of level, we're not talking Premiership class, we're not talking international class, we're talking world class, we're talking top half dozen, in the world at that particular time. They've got to have the ability to almost fight for the right to play. And that's what Dennis Bergkamp could do, and it shouldn't be underestimated, that his steel.
And I'm sure you'll all remember, greatest hat-trick I've ever seen. I've ever been fortunate enough to witness happen in front of me at the old Filbert Street. The hat-trick he scored against Leicester, game finished in a 3-3 draw, but you would just never ever forget. And of course the third goal, which I'd still put up there with perhaps the best goal I've ever seen an Arsenal player score. The third goal of that hat-trick, just how great a player he was that he went out and did that goal the following summer for Argentina in a World Cup against Holland. Just for kind of quality and ability and reading the game and seeing the pass. There's just nobody to touch the fella.
No, absolutely. He was incredible. And I think he was such an intelligent player, you know, for the wonderful, spectacular goals. You know, the goal he scored, you know, against Leicester, where he sort of flips it over his, you know, the Leicester defender's head with one foot, and then opens up his body and then steers it in the top corner with the other. For every spectacular goal of that is the precision pass, the incredible vision to release, you know, the strike.
Freddie Ljungberg or Omri or Wright or whoever it was.
It doesn't matter who it is, you know, but they'd all say, who's the best player you've ever played with? And they'd all say to